Hi, hello, and welcome back to the Wool Sea Knitting channel. My name is Rachel, I am your host, and I am a knitter in Ottawa, Canada. This channel is my chatty outlet to talk all things knitting with occasional guest appearances with other yarny crafts, and it is the first week of October. And you might be thinking, Rachel, that is not an appropriate outfit for a autumnal knitting, welcoming fall first week of October video. And I would agree, except we are currently experiencing the hottest first week of October on record in the province of Ontario, Canada. So here I am in a mohair t-shirt. This is the Ghost Whisperer top by Park Williams, and I knit this in Wandering Flock mohair in the color Mother of Pearl, and it's actually not, it's pretty translucent. It's not as opaque as it seems. I'm wearing this tank top underneath that magically, whenever I wear, it really seems to blend into the background, and well, it's more obvious on camera, but usually lets the colorway show. So I like to wear this sometimes when the temperature allows, and it feels very fresh and I like it. It's very fun, it feels very feminine, and it's pretty temperature regulating, which is often something I seek out in my knitting. So I'm wearing my Ghost Whisperer top because I don't think I ever actually wore it as a finished object to show how it sits and wears after I made it this spring, and I figure this is probably the last chance I will, and I'm hoping to film an appropriately seasonal sweater next time. I just finished filming this video a few minutes ago, and it occurred to me to say something about the fact that I'm aware that my video quality has been really low in the past few videos. I don't know what's going wrong. I'm finding that it's totally fine in editing, and then something is going sideways when it comes to uploading the video to YouTube. I'm really sorry about that, and I am working on it. Hopefully this video is not affected, but if it is, I'm aware and I'm trying to make it better. Okay. Before we get into the main substance of this podcast, I am so excited to announce, or I guess follow up on Erin's existing announcement, that Erin of the Curry and Knits podcast and I are going to be co-hosting the Great Canadian Knit / Make Along in celebration of Canadian wool, sheep, and designers, and all things in this kind of fiber arts and craft space. So I have long talked about being interested in Canadian fibers, and not just indie dyers, but also people who are raising sheep and using their wool and their fleece to make stuff that we can craft with, like yarn and spinning fiber and, you know, all those other beautiful things. And I often will show people, you know, acquisitions, like, I got this really cool skein and this is the story of it. It's from one of the 2 mohair flocks in all of Ontario. And then I often find myself that as excited as I am about Canadian wool in concept, I am often so much more likely to knit with the shiny fibers and covet the shiny fibers that a lot of my friends overseas have access to and talk about a lot. I find myself pretty easily influenced by the people who I exist in this like YouTube and Instagram and social media space with, and find myself coveting a lot of European yarns like Arvetta and Folcolana and Senna's garn lines, and even now I'm knitting one of my projects with Knitting for Olive, and I'm caught up in the hype for a bunch of like American indie dyers, and so there's kind of a disconnect sometimes. I'm wearing mohair from Wandering Flock right now, and I don't regret any of those things. I don't intend to stop trying interesting yarns and things that other people have vouched for and given good reviews on, but I find that there's not like a similar woohoo about Canadian yarns, and as a result I don't feel sometimes as excited to knit with them. And that's just an example of me being someone who goes with the flow sometimes and, you know, gets caught up in trends and stuff like that. But as someone who really likes the ability to connect with like long-term practices, things that people have been doing for a long time, and innovations in fiber, and trying interesting fibers and things that I don't always have access to if I go to a yarn store, and just being really interested in Canadian yarn and the things that are immediately local to me or a little bit less expensive, or just like supporting kind of more local farmers. I sometimes like I'll buy the yarn, but I don't make the stuff with it as much because I'm always drawn to wanting to see what it's like to knit with Senna's garn and all these other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you doing that. There's nothing wrong with me doing that. But Erin and I have long talked about our mutual love of Canadian wool, and I really think that this knit-along is going to be a really good way to kind of, if you're in the same boat, if you're in Canada or just the northern US, and you're so often thinking about yarns that are like not local and really far away and feel a lot more exciting in these and interesting and cool, to kind of shine a light on the stuff we have a little bit closer to home so that that can feel exciting too, and maybe showcase a little bit of what we have going on here, and also just so that I have a reason that I'm really excited for to use up a lot of the stuff that I've been amassing. And so I have a pile of Canadian wool from Canadian sheep and mills and dyers that I will be talking about, and the knitting plans I have for the Great Canadian Make-Along at the end of this video in place of acquisitions. But I just wanted to introduce this KAL first, and you should watch Erin's video announcing it as well to understand a little bit more of her reasons for, co-hosting this. We're going to be doing this until the end of December. So to enter, take a photo and post it to Instagram with the hashtag #TheGreatCanadianMKAL. And maybe tag me and Erin. Her information will be linked down below, as well as her video talking about this. And I think I'm not sure if we'll be able to see it if you post with the hashtag and you have a private account. So if you have a private account and you want to participate and you don't want to make it public or like allow us to follow you, maybe email one of us and we can figure it out from there. And I think whips are okay if you wanted to, if it's like less than, a quarter of the way done to enter. But yeah, I also talk a lot about how I think for Americans, Canadian yarns are a pretty good opportunity to use cool fibers and buy hand-dyed yarn at a much lower price, because the conversion really works in American favor. And so if you don't get slammed with duties and if postage isn't too much, you can buy really beautiful things for much less money. But yeah, so we'll be running this until the end of the year. I am personally, and I think Erin is too, totally fine if you enter something in our KAL that's made with Canadian yarn or a pattern by a Canadian designer, and then it also applies to another knit or make along. That's totally fine. I have a project in mind that I'm hoping I can also use to enter the knitting page, High Fiber Knits, and Gabby Sews's tomato soup core make along, which I think is just so fun. And this is really just to maybe take some time to celebrate things that are available here in Canada and to show viewers far away a little bit about what's going on in the Canadian fiber shed, because I personally always find it so interesting to hear about local fiber manufacturing or just fibers that are available in specific places, like how possum is available in Australia to help combat their invasive species problem with possums there, or how Senna's Garn Peer Gynt is an entirely Norwegian sheep mill dyed operation, and the long history of like the Olympic sweaters and Peer Gynt. I thought that was so much fun to learn. So over the next few months, I will be knitting a bunch of things from my stash using Canadian wools, talking to you about those Canadian wools, hoping to knit some more things from Canadian designers, because I'm thinking I've only ever knit one thing from a Canadian designer, and talking about things I've learned about Canadian fiber and sheep and knitting along the way. I have a book coming from the library I'm very excited about. So I hope that you consider joining. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we do have prizes associated. Erin has some really cool ones, including a sweaters quantity or a slipover quantity a garment quantity of vintage Canadian wool, as she is the knitting thrifting queen, as well as some skeins from Wellington Fiber, which is very interesting. And I am still procuring all of my different prizes, and I did just spend 20 minutes tearing my room apart trying to find the 2 packs of stitch markers I got last weekend for this, so I'm just gonna have to include a photo, but I am going to be giving one of these very beautiful hanks, which I undid and then can't get back into pretty skein form, of Emily C. Gillies Maritime Aran, which is a heavy worsted / Aran weight yarn that is I think it's woolen spun, so it's super light and super lofty despite being a heavier weight. It is 219 meters or 240 yards per 100 grams, and this is the color Sea Glass, which is a beautiful tonal with some dark and light bits in it. And I have knit a whole sweater in this yarn already in a different color, and the entire thing is from sheep grown in the Maritimes, it's milled in the Maritimes, and it's dyed by Emily in the Maritimes, which is the eastern provinces of Canada along the Atlantic north of Maine for my American friends. And I love this yarn so much. It's one of my all-time favorite yarns. It feels nice and woolly, but as you can see, I have a turtleneck in it, and I find this so comfortable to wear. And Emily has this beautiful way of dyeing tonals where it's really consistent. I didn't alternate skeins here, but you still have beautiful, slightly darker, slightly lighter bits, and that's present in Sea Glass too. So I think that you could either get a really nice contrast colorwork sweater out of this, or a really beautiful pair of mittens and maybe a headband or a hat and a little scarf, something like that. But I personally consider this to be next to skin soft. And along with this, you will receive some Canadian stitch markers, little pine cones from Firefly Notes, where almost all of my stitch markers are from. Firefly Notes, the maker, is based out of British Columbia. I got these little pine cones for you, and I wish I could find them. And then I will also gift you on Ravelry or your pattern provider of choice one pattern from a Canadian designer. Up to you, you can choose whoever you want. And I'm hoping to showcase more Canadian designers over the course of this make-along because I'd like to make more of their patterns. So that's prize number 1. Prize number 2 is the same stitch markers, the pattern of a Canadian designer of your choice, and then a skein of yarn that I haven't picked up yet, but in a base and by a dyer that I know is having a trunk show at one of the local Ottawa yarn stores in a couple weekends. Alley Cat Yarn. This is my skein of the same yarn, and it's Ontario Sock, which is 80% Ontario wool. It's a Cheviot Dorset mix and 20% mohair, and it's pretty nicely, tightly spun. And I got this in the color Persimmon, which is sold out online, but I'm hoping to get another skein and another color as the second prize because all of the fiber is, like I keep saying, has been raised, milled, and dyed here. Alley Cat Yarns is a local Ottawa dyer, and Ontario is the province where I live, so this would be very, very local to me and then to you. So I'll get back to you on which colorway we are going to end up as the second prize, but those are the 2 prizes for me. We will be picking at different points, and you should go see Erin's video as well. So her details are down below, and at the end of this video, I will walk you through my hopes, dreams, aspirations for my Canadian yarns. But before that, we have a podcast to get through. So I'm filming a little earlier than I usually would because this upcoming weekend is Thanksgiving, and I will be visiting family. But my only real finished object is my ripple bralette, and even then you can see that there are ends that need to be woven in. I made this one size up from what I would normally go on based on the size guide, and then I went down 3 needle sizes, and I find this very comfortable. This is Amelia, a Fidomine Canadian hand dyer, and it's a 50% cotton, 50% superwash merino blend that was gifted to me as a collaboration with Unit for a different pattern, Knitalong, the Florencia tee, which I talked about in my last episode. And this is what I had left over, so I made it into this ripple bralette. I like these a lot as undershirts in the winter. And yeah, I don't really have anything particularly interesting to say. I knit this at a tighter gauge to compensate for how much I know superwash merino and cotton like to grow, and I didn't stretch it a lot horizontally while blocking. And I knit it significantly longer to make it more of an undershirt bralette as opposed to a bralette. I find that these do not offer much by way of support, but they are good for keeping my core temperature warm while allowing airflow to my neck, armpits, chest, etc. And they're also just fun to make. This took me longer than I expected. I think I knit this for a full week in between finishing the projects that I showed you in my last episode and starting these ones, which one of them is my like fisherman knit fall cast on with my friend Charlotte, so I had to wait for the equinox. And I remember this is the second one that I knit, and the first one that I knit, I had to redo the back bind off I think 3 times because it kept being too tight, and at the time I was a very tight knitter, but assumed it was entirely me. However, since then I have seen Amanda of the Knits by Mandy podcast and Emily of the High Fiber Knits podcast both comment on how tight their back bind-offs were as well. So that made me feel rather validated and emboldened to go up like a million needle sizes and then use a stretchier bind-off than the one that was recommended in pattern for that. And now it is a little too loose, so I have to sew in some elastic, but overall it's very comfortable. I think I'm going to get a lot of wear out of this. It will be very good for underneath my darker work blouses when I don't want to wear a cardigan and I want something lightweight, but my work blouses are too cold for my overly cold office. And yeah, this is it. Triple Bralette by Jessie May at Jessie Made Designs. If you're looking for a loungewear piece, if you're looking for pajamas or like what my mother would call a vest, and I think Brits call vests, like a camisole undershirt type deal, highly recommend. However, I find the term bralette to be a little misleading, if that makes sense. And that's something people have asked me about in the past. Does that really offer any support? No. And sometimes I wear those kinds of tops as tops with an overshirt and a proper bra underneath in the warmer months. And that's my only finished object. I also don't have much spinning to talk about of note because I have really fallen in love with fall knitting and sweaters and heavy things in darker colors, and I've just been knitting up a storm. But one thing that we will not see a lot of progress on is my second porch light sock from 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 1. I did this entire cuff and got to this exact point before realizing that I had done it in 1x1 rib, and as you can see it's supposed to be 2x2 rib, so I had to redo that completely, and then I kind of lost momentum. I am at exactly the part where you start the color work and the little moth motif, which will be a lot of fun when I decide that I want to do that, but in the meantime I have been this bit, I'm right about here. But in the meantime, I am very preoccupied with other things that are a little bit more exciting to me. So I think I will pack this to go visit my mom for Thanksgiving, and I think it will be very good socializing or TTC knitting as I'm zooming around Toronto to see my friends. But in the meantime, it has not gotten much attention. 2 things that have, however, are 2 completely fresh cast-ons, and one is a sweater and the other is a sweater vest or a slipover, or what's the third term people use? What's the other regional variation? Okay, first I'm gonna go with the sweater though. So in my fall plans video, and if you watch that, a lot of these will be familiar to you, hopefully in a good way, I said that I was torn between starting 2 different sweaters, a blue Pippin sweater and a gray Fortune sweater. And at the time I was leaning more towards the Fortune sweater. However, when it came time to pick one of them, I had just finished 2 all over lace tees, and where I spent the entire 2 projects yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then counting a certain amount and then making sure constantly that my motifs were placed correctly of the lace, and counting rows and counting stitches. And the idea of continuing in lace, even with lace as minimal as the Fortune sweater, I simply had no no desire to do so. And even though the project that I did cast on was the exact same color as 4 that I had just finished, it won out because knitting experience still beats color for me in terms of things that are tiring or fun, I guess. And as a result, I have a brand new Pippin sweater to show you. And I have been having so much fun knitting this, even though I am a little bit concerned about fit. So this sweater is knit in 1 strand of Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Dusty Dove Blue, and 1 strand Shibui Knits Silk Mohair in the color Graphite. I got both of these yarns on sale last year during Boxing Week or Boxing Day sales, because Unit had a sale on the Merino, and then Shibui Knits announced that they were closing, and so I got that on sale as well, which was nice because those are 2 very luxury brands. And I got a scanned sweaters quantity, which is part of the reason why this neckband is another color. It's a folded neckband, as you can see, and I wanted to make the yarn last as long as possible. So for the part that will mostly just be against my neck, I chose some scrap, incredibly fancy alpaca merino cashmere Fiber Company Road to China Light yarn that I had left over from my balaclava last year as the inside, because I can be quite sensitive to mohair against my neck. It would help use up some scrap yarn. It would extend the yarn that I actually did have just by a few pounds, I think. And I just really like it as a little personal signature. I mean, no one's going to see it but me when I'm actually wearing it, but I know that most of the folded neckbands I've done in the past year have had a contrast inside folded bit, and that makes me happy. And this has flown by. It is just so much fun. It is knit in all over sand stitch. I'm going to bring it closer so you can see. And basically you knit purl for a row, then you knit the row, and then unlike broken rib where you would knit purl again, you purl knit. So it's more like broken moss stitch, and I love moss stitch, and I love this. It feels very nice to hold. I think it looks really nice with the blue. I think these 2 yarns have mixed very well together, and this has been just so much fun to knit that I actually almost missed the sleeve separation and the part where you change the rate of increases at the raglan because it was flying by so fast. And yes, so this is by the Knit Purl girl, Sophie Hemmings. I got this when it first came out a year ago because, like I said, I love an all over knit purl texture. I like the Knit Purl girl's pattern writing style. And my beloved dog, who died a couple years ago, was also named Pippin, and it felt a beautiful way to feel connected to him and honor him a little bit. He's the best boy in the whole wide world. I miss him a lot. Great dog. So, Pippin sweater. Sentimental, practical, feels very me. I like it a lot. The only thing is, and I can't tell if it's just because this is kind of scrunched on the needles, but the sleeves feel very big compared to the body. And I was looking at a bunch of photos, and I'm wondering if I know my stitch counts are correct. I'm wondering if my gauge or if I did something strange, because the photos don't make it look like it has a fitted body and puffy sleeves like this, but what I'm working with does, and this yoke depth feels kind of low. Sorry, it feels kind of short. But I also know that knit purl and things like this have a tendency to relax, so I'm imagining that that is the problem, but I knit and blocked a swatch, but that's not really going to tell me a lot when it comes to the amount of weight that this is going to have versus my few inch sized swatch. So I think I've only done the sleeve. I started this like barely more than a week and a half ago. I have only done a couple centimeters, I mean not even, after sleeve and body separation. So once I get a little bit farther, I'm going to put it on waste yarn and try it on and see if I maybe need to rip back to before the sleeve and body separation and change the rate of increases more than is written in the pattern to end up with smaller sleeves, or maybe I decide it's not worth it and I just have a puffier sleeve sweater and work in some decreases. But overall, knitting this has been a lot of fun, and it's been a good mindless break compared to the all over cabled vest that I'm also working on. I was concerned that I would have a difficult time establishing the knit purl texture and maintaining it, and that I would make mistakes, but the way that you increase for the raglan means that it's kind of hard to do that, which makes this, I think, good still for the people who like an all-over stockinette sweater, but still adds enough interest for the people who simply cannot finish a stockinette sweater because they are too boring. So far, I recommend the Pippin sweater in terms of knitting experience, and I'll keep you posted on how the fit turns out. I don't remember if the Knit Purl Girl adds, I guess I should use her real name, if Sophie uses schematics that tell you not just length and bust circumference, but yoke depth and sleeve circumference. I should check the pattern and see. I know that I'm knitting this slightly off gauge. It's supposed to be 22 inches in, nope, 22 stitches per 4 inches, and I'm at 21, which I'm okay with. I would like a bit of a looser, I wanted 20 to 21 stitch gauge for a mohair sweater so the yarn lasts a little bit longer because I am playing yarn chicken. But in terms of knitting process, it's been great. And my other work in progress, which has been absolutely delightful, this is the Lana Vest by Irene Lim. And I did not want to put the finished front half on a cable, some waste yarn, so the stitches that are resting here, stitches that are currently being worked here are on the same cable, which means this wants to flip. But the combination of working on this and the Pippin sweater has made the last week and a bit absolutely delightful in terms of me and my hobbies. I am really enjoying the wooliness of these two projects. I'm enjoying working at not a fingering weight gauge. I'm happy to be back at a DK and a heavy worsted. This is an 18 stitch gauge pattern. I am using a worsted weight yarn as is called for. I like the thick cables. I like the nubbly texture of the Pippin sweater. And while I enjoyed all my fingering weight patterns that I knit over the warmer months, I haven't knit anything that hasn't been a fingering weight garment since I think March, or sock. And it was simply too long. I mean, okay, there were a couple accessories. I knit sport weight accessory and a DK weight pair of socks. So, you know, I'm not really that committed to tiny needles, but this has just been so good. And as you can see, it's gone by really fast. I started this on the autumn equinox, which was the Saturday before last, and it has just been flying by. I finished the back panel, which has cables on either side, the braided cables, the left and right leaning cables, and then this knit purl diamond texture going down the back. I have made mistakes, but this was pretty easy to memorize and then not have to keep the chart or the written instructions out while working on. I did miscross one cable here, which you can see, but I noticed it too late to go down, and I decided it didn't really bother me, especially since it's at the back top. So who's going to see? My hair's usually going to cover it. And I finished the right front last night. I'm working on the left front now. It's a V-neck. It is just great. It's so much fun. I so far have been enjoying Irene Lim's pattern writing style. Everything is charted and written out row by row. I personally find the charts much easier to work, but it's kind of nice to have the written instructions for the setup rows. And either way, it means that anybody who likes either one has options. I'm knitting this in a Canadian yarn, so this is my first official entry to the Great Canadian Knitalong. Irene Lim is a Taiwanese pattern designer, but this yarn is from Quebec, not far from me. I picked it up at Twist Fiber Festival. Here is the ball. I love it. I like a dark red, but often they end up kind of being a little bit too orange or a little bit too purple. I really like that this just feels like a good, dark, cool toned red, like a cranberry red. It does not have a colorway name because this is yarn by Les Moutons de Richard. Here is his label. I get the sense that Richard is a very small hobby producer, and this is 50% wool, 50% mohair, all from Canada. and it's a 3-ply, which is part of the reason why, even though it's dark, these cables are really popping. And it has been a dream to work with. My friend Charlotte is knitting another one of Irene Lim's vests, the Myra vest. She first thought of the Lana vest, and then I took her plan, and then she decided to switch to the Myra vest. And she's doing this in another color of Richard's yarn, also gorgeous, more of a steely blue mixed with gray. And this has been a dream to work with, except, interestingly, so at the beginning of starting these projects, I turned to my friend Charlotte, we were knitting on a patio, and I said, do you feel like there's a lot of vegetable matter to pick out of this? And she goes, no. Do you? And I said, I mean, a little bit. And so I thought that maybe, I know Charlotte loves a woolly wool, she just is more used to vegetable matter than I am in her yarns. But then I was starting to wind up all the different skeins that I had, and not just the skein that I had used to start the back panel and my swatches with. And I noticed that I have 2 that have so much vegetable matter, and 3 that have almost none. And the 2 that have a lot of vegetable matter have a lot of thick and thin plies, or like kind of messy ones. I cut out a bit of it to show you. As opposed to, which is your standard yarn. So I noticed that I have this in a few of my Canadian yarns and my Green Mountain Spinnery yarns, and I thought it was interesting to show you, and this would have been annoying to me in a cable, I think, if it had really made things look uneven and like my stitches were off as opposed to the yarn, but not enough for it to bother me. And because I got this from Twist Fiber Fest from a man who is selling this at very low prices and does not feel like a very like highly professionalized operation, just feels like someone who owns sheep and is very enthusiastic about it. This to me is very charming, but I do want to give you a heads up. The only storefront I can find online for this is a Facebook page, and I highly recommend that you consider getting some, or if you see this available at a local yarn festival in Ontario or Quebec, that you go and check out Richard's wares, because both me and Charlotte have found the yarn that we have to be great to work with. It's so soft, it has this beautiful sheen. I liked him. However, be aware that there does seem to be some inconsistency there. Not enough to stop me. I will be tracking this man's movements for a while to continue buying his yarn, but I felt like it's something that I should maybe tell you guys. And I think that this could add a really nice effect in an all-over stockinette garment. But because I have cables, I don't want that to mess with that, especially since this is a darker color, and I feel like it's easy enough to get cables lost in a darker color with a variegated colorway. But for a man who just seems to be doing this with his sheep because he can, really consistent dyeing. These are different balls of yarn. I have not been alternating them. Consistent colors, beautiful yarn. I like it a lot. This is the Lana vest, and I'm hoping to finish this by the end of October. Not for any particular reason beyond I have been knitting it a lot, and I want to wear this vest. So those are my works in progress. And I don't have any acquisitions, so that's a victory. And not that there's anything wrong with buying yarn, I just have more than enough yarn for the foreseeable future. And so I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk you guys through some of my Canadian sheepy yarns that I would like to be knitting this fall winter as part of the Great Canadian Knit/Make-Along. So if you guys have been here before, you might recall that I knit my grandfather a pair of socks for Christmas every year. He appreciates my sock knitting more than most. Not that anyone else, no one has ever been mean to me about knitting. Everyone is sometimes bewildered but very supportive and very interested in why do you like this so much and why are you always making socks. But first time I ever knit a sock, I was hanging out with my grandfather, my mother, and my step-grandmother. And my grandfather asked, "What are you knitting?" And I said, "A sock." And he said, before I could even start to explain anything, "You've already turned the heel." But apparently my grandfather's mother, my great-grandmother, was a prolific sock knitter who knit my grandfather and his brother and a lot of other people in their lives a lot of socks, and as a result, my grandfather has a great respect and appreciation, not just for knitting, not just for sock knitting, but Canadian sheep in general. So I make him socks every year in a DK weight. He has some circulation issues, as is normal, and for, people of a certain age. So I usually make him very big, stretchy DK weight socks. And the first year I used a West Yorkshire Spinners DK non-superwash wool nylon blend that was, I think it was Air Valley DK, which is discontinued. I would keep getting it if I could for him because he really, really, really loves those socks. They're never put away. They're always near his chair, even in the height of summer, because my grandfather is of British and Irish descent, and I felt appropriate. And this year I'm going to use Briggs & Little, which is a DK weight, or Briggs & Little is a yarn manufacturer, and I have one skein of Tuffy, and I have one skein of Heritage, and I'm going to use these to make him DK weight Canadian wool socks. So Briggs & Little is the longest continually operating yarn mill in all of Canada. It is a family operation, and they mill a lot of yarns for other people as well, and they use mostly Canadian sheep. So my friend Carolyn, hi Carolyn, got me these two when she was on vacation in an artisty town with her fiance ages ago. And I've been waiting for the perfect project for them because this has 20% nylon in it. So I thought maybe this would make a really fabulous tiny rug or mat or something, but I keep not making that. And I think that my grandfather, of all people, would especially appreciate Canadian wool socks because apparently back in the 40s, you had all nylon sock yarn. I don't mean, 50-50, I mean it was 100% nylon. So whenever my grandfather sees me knitting socks, he goes, okay, but are they wool or are they nylon? And I say there's both. And he finds this to be an interesting innovation. And he really, really, really likes wool. He's very pro wool. He's pro rustic wool. And I made him a pair of superwash socks last Christmas, and I noticed he doesn't seem to wear them as much. So we're returning to this stuff. And I like this color more, and then I was thinking I would do a contrast heel toe cuff with this because he does like something of a psychedelic sock because that's what his mother would make him with the 100% nylon sock yarn. But this is the kind that's 100% wool, and this is the kind that has some nylon in it, and so it would make sense to have this for the heel and the toe more than this. So I gotta figure that out. But this is the Tuffy in the color Rosewood, which has some really beautiful heathering and depth of color when you bring it up close. And then when it's far away, it's just a pretty red. And then this, as you can see, is two colors plied together. Pretty beautiful. I would not be surprised if this is two natural sheep colors. And these will be socks for Papa. And I'm excited to cast these on for him soon when I decide if I'm going to say I don't care and make him non-superwash nylon-free socks. He's not really wearing these in like shoes with heels. He's wearing these in his slippers. So, socks. For a very knit-worthy person, he knows to expect socks. I think he will appreciate the Canadian wool. And I want to knit more with Briggs & Little. It is so inexpensive here in Canada. You can get 100 grams of 100% wool for $8-9 Canadian, which is kind of unheard of. Things are just kind of more expensive here for a variety of reasons, and our currency is usually less than the American dollar, the euro, and the pound by a lot. So having access to Briggs & Little is a great resource that I personally feel like I don't take enough advantage of. I'm really happy my friend Carolyn got these for me so I can try it out because there is a particular sweater that I want to make in Briggs & Little Heritage, and I'm waiting for Wabi Sabi to restock it, and if not, Charlotte and I are going to Wool Time. So, very excited about this. Briggs & Little yarn, especially Heritage, is stocked in some American yarn stores as well, and in yarn stores across Canada. Many of them ship at least to the United States, if not internationally. And they have a lot of colors like this that have a really beautiful depth of color up close, but have a nice solid tonality or a solid... You look at it and you're not confused. It doesn't feel like a variegated color work. You could use it for cables, you could use it for color work. if you wanted to from afar. So, socks for Papa, number 1. Number 2, socks for me in this. I'm thinking either the Humlaby socks by Fiber Tales or the Grow socks by Fiber Tales in this. And do you think this is tomato soupy enough for the tomato soup core KAL? I'm wondering if it's too orange or not orange enough. I don't know. But I have been thinking about this for ages, and it just sits out so I can look at it and admire how beautiful it is. And then I keep not knitting with it, and that is going to change this year. I really want to see what a mohair in place of nylon sock, how well that holds up. I walk around a lot, I wear boots, I take transit, I am active and on the go. I want to see if these are going to hold up well and can be used to transition out of using a lot of merino superwash nylon socks, especially since Alley Cat Yarns is very available to me as someone who is in Ottawa. Very excited about this. I want to knit the storm sweater in my long way homestead. This is undyed. This is coming from Manitoba, and this is, I always forget because it's not written on here. I just have to remember what they told me when I bought this at Knit City, Montreal. I think it's a Rideau Arcot and then Canadian Arcot blend, or Rideau Arcot and just plain Arcot blend, but I think it's nice and soft. It has a little bit of that thick and thin texture too. Here, like my Richard yarn does. I think I'll be able to wear this next to skin, but with a t-shirt underneath. I think it'll make a really beautiful storm sweater in a similar color to Petite Knit's really beautiful neutral one. I really like the knit purl texture of that. And I think that's what this is going to be once I finish my Lana vest and or my Pippin sweater. This is actually a sock set that none other than Erin of Korean Knits gave to me in the first place when we met last year. And this is from the Creative Knitter, which is a newer indie hand dyer who I don't think is using Canadian sheeped bases, but I personally think indie dyers count. And she is in Ontario, Canada, which is where I am. I think in the Waterloo-Kitchener adjacent area close to Erin, and Erin gave this to me because she was gifted some really beautiful skeins of the Creative Knitter's work back when the Creative Knitter started her yarn business. And Erin is not a sock knitter but knows that I am, so she really graciously gave me this. And I think that this will be a pair of socks for my roommate Nicole, whose birthday is in December and who has said, you know, because I was saying that I would like to knit my boyfriend some socks, and I know that he would accept them, but he doesn't want socks. And we were joking about this because as much as I would love to give him socks, the gift is actually about him and not about what I want to give him. And so Nicole said, I'm just saying I would be happy to receive knit socks from you any day. So these are very Nicole colors, and I think that this will be a pair of socks for her. And for Nathan, my boyfriend, I would like to make a pair of socks for him in this. This is the one that's the least likely to happen, but this is Natural You, which is an organic and recycled nylon eco sock base from Natural You, which is a mother-daughter duo based out of the Maritimes as well in Canada. I think they're in Nova Scotia, but I'm afraid that I'm wrong and they're actually in New Brunswick. And they use natural dye, they use a lot of organic and recycled materials in their bases, and I think that this would also make a really lovely sock. So you can see a lot of intersection between my Canadian yarn plans, my upcoming knitting plans, and my gift knitting plans. But yeah, that's what I'm really excited to use for the Great Canadian Make-Along, and I really hope that you join me. And to emphasize on the make-along bit, we're saying knitting a lot because Erin and I are both knitters. The main driver behind this make-along is to celebrate Canadian yarns, but weavers, spinners, needle felters, you are all welcome to participate. Crochet is more than welcome here. And so emphasis on knitting, making is also incredibly welcome. And I really hope that you choose to join us. Use the hashtag #TheGreatCanadianMKAL, and I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. So I hope to be able to show you more prizes like in their entirety in little kits that I'm going to make next time or in the future. And I really hope that you and your loved ones are happy and healthy. I hope that you are enjoying some autumn or spring knitting depending on where you are. And I hope to have a finished Lana vest to parade around in front of you in very soon. But okay, my neighbors have started to yell outside. I think that is my signal to start wrapping this up. And I hope you guys are well. Okay,